All right, look, man, I know this is going to sound totally crazy, but there's a reality where the New York football Giants win the Super Bowl in 2026. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how that's possible. I'm going to go through all 16 NFC teams, and we're just going to do a slight breakdown on how I think they can all win the Super Bowl this upcoming year. Um, I was thinking about doing an individual breakdown for each team in the NFL, but I settled for this video where we'll do a way briefer breakdown. And if you guys want to see more in depth things, just let me know, and I'm still happy to go through each team. And yeah, man, thanks for joining me on the P Factor. I'm your host P, and let's get started. So the way I have this structured is we're going to go through each division, and we'll start with the first place team in the division and work our way to the last place team. And just to preface, I'm not going to make any bold claims here like, oh, the New York Giants need to trade for Patrick Mahomes or anything like that. I've tried to be as realistic as possible with my takes here, just based on salary cap, draft capital, what the team situation's like. And I have some notes here which I'm going to go off of based on my research. And one last thing, when I talk about cap space in this video, I'm talking about effective cap space. That's the true cap space a team has after at least 51 players are signed to the roster, and this accounts for their projected salary that'll go towards their draft picks. So basically, this is how much money the team actually has to spend. And hey man, I got all my research and data from PFF, ESPN, all those sites, you name it. So if I mispronounce something if I butcher a stat, go for their heads, not mine. All right, so let's start with the NFC North. This is a super interesting division, and we'll start with the super interesting team in the Detroit Lions, man. So Detroit, I really thought this team was going to go to the Super Bowl, make it out of the NFC. Huge playoff disappointment coming off arguably the greatest year in their franchise's history. They lost to a solid Ram squad, they lost to a solid Commander squad with a hot Jaden Daniels, but still, that was a game you'd think they'd win against a rookie quarterback, especially considering they didn't get the job done last year too. So I think the biggest thing is, man, they lost Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. Those are two football masterminds, and at least you still got Dan Campbell leading the show there, but those are two big losses. So I don't think those could be undermined, man. They have about 46 mil in cap space. Good news is basically their whole starting offense and defense is returning. You'll have Hutchinson coming back from injury, but for them to win the Super Bowl, they need to fix that secondary. That secondary was bottom 3 in passing yards allowed, and that's not going to slide when you play a high octane team like the Commanders or the Eagles come playoff time. I think you let Carlton Davis walk. He just didn't have as good of a year as you'd expect out of a contract that big, and I think they take that cap space and target a player like DJ Reed or Charvarius Ward and get an upgrade in the secondary. And yeah, I think this team's still poised for a Super Bowl run next year as long as Goff plays well. And I think they just use free agency in the draft to solidify their depth. And man, just feed Jahmyr Gibbs next year. You have Monrod, just Sam Laporta, I think will have a better year next year. And yeah, I'm not too worried about the Lions. But yeah, man, feed Gibbs, fix that secondary, and they should be in good shape. All right, so now let's move to the second place team in this division, Minnesota Vikings. So another playoff disappointment. They lost the Rams in the wild card round. And honestly, I wasn't really thinking Super Bowl for the Vikings. I know a lot of people thought they had a complete team. I mean, they did have a complete team under a great coaching staff, but I just didn't think they'd get the job done against teams like Detroit or Philadelphia. But hey, man, they lost to the Rams, so they couldn't even get past the wild card round. And the biggest question mark here this offseason is, do you ride with J.J. McCarthy, the guy you invested your first-round pick in last year, or do you ride the hot hand in Sam Darnold, who honestly choked when playoffs rolled around? And I think for them to win the Super Bowl, you let Darnold walk, you ride out that rookie contract with J.J., see what he has. I mean, you invested a first-round pick in him. Unless you're planning on trading him this year, I think you just got to go with him, man. You drafted him for a reason. Your coaching staff believes in him. Your front office believes in him. And this is another team that has most of their starting roster locked down. They have about 57 mil in cap. You got to lock down Byron Murphy. He's a free agent this year. He's going to have a market if they don't lock him down. And then I think you let Stephon Gilmore walk as your second corner. I think that's something they can take care of in the draft or sign another guy. But Gilly's reaching that age, and he showed some flashes, but he wasn't as consistent as years past. And Aaron Jones is another free agent they have. I think you let him walk. And this running back class is deep, man. They could draft a replacement for him, and on day 2, maybe even day 3. So I think that's the route they take. And for them to win the Super Bowl, you get a J.J. McCarthy masterclass all year with Jettas, and they might be in business. So that's their key. So now let's move on to the Packers. All right, so another team that made it out the playoffs in this division, pretty solid year. They lost to Philly in the wild card round, who were the eventual Super Bowl winners, as we all know. Jordan Love faced some injury all year, and this is there's a common trend going on in this division. It looks like this is another team where mostly their entire roster is locked down going into this year, and they have about 38 mil in cap space. But they have a problem that they've been avoiding for a decade. They need to address that wide receiver position, man. You got Romeo Doubs, you got Watson, you got Jaden Reed, you got Dontavian Wicks, and all these guys have shown flashes for a game, for 2 games, but then they disappear or they get hurt. And I think you need to get Jordan Love some help here for real. These guys aren't going to cut it when it comes to the playoffs. You can have them as supporting receivers. I think it's a great receiver room if you add a bona fide wide receiver 1. So I would love to see them make a splash this free agency to land a receiver for those Super Bowl to win that Lombardi Trophy. Some guys that come to mind for me are maybe go after T. Higgins, Chris Godwin in free agency. Inquire about Garrett Wilson and Deebo Samuels. They're both trade candidates. And who knows, maybe a Devontae Adams reunion. I think you got to explore all options here. And man, pair stud wide receiver with Jordan Love, and you got Josh Jacobs, who just had a great year on the ground. And this team, they got Super Bowl aspirations. Cool. And now let's move on to the last team in the division, the Chicago Bears. So I think the biggest thing here is pretty obvious. You need Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze to progress. You drafted him really high. Obviously, Caleb at 1, who was supposed to be a generational quarterback. And, he showed what it's like to be a rookie in year 1. And, that's normal. We've seen it. We've been spoiled lately with guys like C.J. Stroud and Jaden Daniels, who have just been phenomenal top 5 QBs that year type of deals. And, I think Caleb's going to be fine. You're bringing in Ben Johnson as your head coach, who I think is huge for them. I think he'll get the best out of guys like Rome, DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift. And, yeah, I think the key for this team to make a run to the Super Bowl and win it is Ben Johnson gets this offense firing on all cylinders. You get Caleb getting the ball to DJ. You see Rome being a top 10 receiver. There's pieces on this team, and the offense was mostly trash last year because of the rookie issues. I think you definitely let Keenan Allen walk here. It didn't really work out there in Chicago. I think he'd be better off somewhere else. And this season starts for them after free agency is huge for them because of the draft, man. You have the 10th pick, and you have Carolina's second round pick and their own second round pick. I think you have to nail these 3 picks, really build off that, and come into the year with some talent and some progression, and you have a shot at the Super Bowl. All right, cool. So that's the whole NFC North. We'll move on to the NFC East now. And let's start with the Super Bowl champs, man, Philly. Honestly, I wasn't a big believer in this team to win it all. But, they won it all. They convincingly won it all. So they already have the recipe. They've been to 2 Super Bowls in the past 3 years. Jalen Hurts proved he can win it all. You got Saquon there, man. That was... you could argue at this point that was the biggest free agency signing this offseason. I mean, they won the Super Bowl. He had the best running back year of all time. So I think you still got a lot of these guys locked down. There's some key free agents out there for them this year. Josh Sweat, Mekhi Becton, to name a few. And they don't have a lot of cap, which you can expect out of a Super Bowl team. But hey, man, if this team stays healthy and focused, they're back in the mix. I'm not gonna spend too much time harping on these guys. So now the next team we got is the Red Hot Commies, man. So this is scary for the NFL. Really scary. You have a Commanders team that just went to the NFC Championship with a rookie quarterback, a brand new coaching staff, basically a brand new roster, and these guys have the third most cap space in the league. $71 million, man. Third most cap space in the league. So these guys are ahead of schedule when it comes to their rebuild. This is crazier than what the Texans did last year. It's comparable, but this is definitely crazier. You beat Detroit, go to the NFC Championship. Crazy. And the scary thing is, like I said, they already had the pieces last year, and all they need to do to make a Super Bowl run next year is build off these pieces. You have some free agents that you got to make decisions on, like Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin, Zach Ertz, Zacchaeus. But with all that money, there's so much room for improvement. And what I really want to see them do is get an upgrade at wide receiver 2. Terry McLaurin was fantastic this year. Great wide receiver 1 for this team. But when you have $70 million, I want you to go out there and target guys like Deebo Samuels and Tyreek Hill. I know the Tyreek Hill Dolphins trade rumors have shut down, but I'm calling them, man. If you can get Tyreek Hill, that's a contract you can take, you call him. And continue to bolster up this defense. Another player I'd like to see them go for is Myles Garrett. If this team gets Myles Garrett and Deebo Samuels or Tyreek Hill and Jaden Daniels continues to do what he does, this is a Super Bowl team, no doubt in my mind. All right, so let's get to the basement of this division, man. There's some interesting stuff right here. So let's start with the Cowboys. Oh, boy. I know this is a franchise and an owner that got a lot of ridicule last season, and rightfully so, man. There was just a lot. Here, I'll just get into it. But, okay, so first of all, interesting hire. You have a new head coach coming in, Brian Schottenheimer. And like I said, interesting hire. I don't hate it. I think it could work out. It seems like Cowboys fans, for the most part, are happy with it. There's a mixed bag of reviews there, but, we'll see what happens there. But we need to talk about some things, man. For their cap space, they're in the negatives. They're at about negative $3 million, which does not help considering the subpar season you just had. And I know Dak Prescott got hurt, which obviously just eliminates your chances to even make it to the Super Bowl. But you have some decisions to make this offseason. You have Brandon Cooks, who's a free agent, who is their only viable receiver outside of CeeDee Lamb. I don't believe in Jalen Tolbert or Jonathan Mingo like that. You have Rico Dowdle, who's a free agent, who I think you consider franchise tagging. He's going to have a market if you let him walk, and you really don't have any depth at running back, viable depth at running back. You have guys like Zach Martin, DeMarcus Lawrence, Eric Kendricks, who are all free agents, and you don't have a lot of money. And like I said, you have some decisions to make here. So another issue that I think is a little underrated is both your backup quarterbacks are free agents. Cooper Rush, who's been great for Dallas when needed, and Trey Lance, who, you can let Trey Lance walk, but you got to figure something. You need to have insurance for if Dak goes down again. So what I think this team needs to do to win the Super Bowl, which is not going to be easy, is first of all, Dak and CeeDee Lamb need to stay healthy. That combination of Dak and CeeDee is a top 5 quarterback receiver duo in the league. There needs to be an answer at running back because this team last year, when Dak was healthy, all defenses had to worry about was lock down CeeDee Lamb and you're chilling. That's literally it. This offense needs to find a way to instill fear back into defenses. And I think you do that by getting Genty in the draft at 12 and franchise tagging Dowdle or bringing back another running back, get a solid 1-2 combo going that makes the other defense worry about the run game. That'll open up opportunities for CeeDee Lamb, your other receivers, for Dak, and I think that could do wonders for this team. So I think if they can create a high-powered offense like some of the Cowboys' offenses in the past, and the right picks are made, this year with the lack of cap space. That's their key to the Super Bowl. All right, man. So now the team I started off promising you with, the New York Football Giants. So there's a way I said, right? And yeah, so this is going to be a long one, but here's what needs to happen. So for the purpose of winning a Super Bowl, let's start out with getting a real quarterback. The Daniel Jones experiment's over. Cutlets ain't going to cut it. You need a quarterback, man. And honestly, as much as I don't like this year's quarterback class, I don't think this team is in a position where they can go the bridge quarterback route, because you have a coaching staff that's under a lot of pressure to win. Dable is fired if he can't be at least an 8-9 win coach this year. Because if he's anything below that, why would they not start bring in a whole new coaching regime for being below average? So I think they're gonna get desperate and take a quarterback this year. And I think for the purpose of winning the Super Bowl, I don't want to get into a whole deep dive with this team of rebuilding the franchise, but I think they draft Shedeur Sanders, hope he has a Jaden Daniels like year, and then you just hope him and Malik Neighbors can feed all the families in New York City. You gotta hope Tyron Tracy progresses, Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence can wreak havoc on that D-line, and they need to hit on every pick in this draft to win the Super Bowl. It's as straightforward as that. And they got about $30 million in cap, make the right moves in free agency. But, oh boy, I think I got to show you guys their schedule real quick. Oh man, it's not loaded. Here, I'll just read it out for you guys. But their schedule, their home games are Dallas, Philadelphia, Washington, Green Bay, Kansas City, the Chargers, Minnesota, and San Francisco. I seriously don't think they win any of those games. They'll end up winning one or two of them, but holy shit, man. And then your away schedule is a little bit more forgiving, but you still play your 3 division games on top of Denver, Detroit, and Chicago, New England, and New Orleans are winnable games as of right now, but Jesus, man. They have a long, tall task to win the Super Bowl. So yeah, that's the Giants. And now we'll move on to the NFC South. So NFC South's an interesting one. And we'll start with the winners of the NFC South. The three times in a row winners, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 3 straight division wins. So not a lot of cap space with this team, less than $5 million. And I think it's pretty evident they're not going to be able to afford Chris Godwin. They have Mike Evans left on one more. He's got one more year left in Tampa, and I think he hangs up the cleats after that one. You have a new OC for the 3rd straight season with Baker. Baker, who absolutely balled last year, proved that he was worth that contract. And I think the key to Super Bowl here for Tampa is the progression of guys like Bucky Irving and Jalen McMillan. Bucky Irving looks like he'll be a top 10 running back next year, maybe even higher. And, Jalen McMillan made some plays, and you're going to need him to with a guy like Chris Godwin gone. And you're going to need Baker to keep playing with the moxie he's been playing with and just feed his guys. And I think what helps Tampa Bay here a lot is a really weak NFC South, in my opinion. I think it's a battle between Atlanta and Tampa, the way things look right now. But I think the key here is they make sure they have a really good draft and prepare this team for the future, because in a year or two from now, this team's going to look really different. A lot of these guys are vets who are coming off their contracts, and yeah, they're going to need to prepare for the future, but hey, they can capitalize off what they got now and try to go get that Super Bowl. So that's the key there. And now here's a very interesting team in the Atlanta Falcons, who I honestly thought were going to be better this year. They had a huge offseason. They barely missed the playoffs, but they were honestly just really underwhelming throughout the season. And that's mostly because of the guy you see on the screen right there, Kirk Cousins. You pay Kirk Cousins the bag coming off that injury, which I didn't hate. Kirk was a pretty good quarterback in Minnesota, but it didn't look like it's going to work out. And like I said, this team had a jam-packed offseason last year, and as expected, they don't really have cap space this year to spend. So I expect the opposite for them this year. I don't think they're going to have a very eventful offseason considering they're in the negatives. But for this team to win the Super Bowl, I think obviously there's a decision looming between Kirk and Penix. I think you find a way to trade Kirk Cousins and you ride it out with Penix on that rookie contract because Kirk is eating up 160 mil over the next few years, man. So you find a way to dump that contract. And then you have some vets set to hit free agency like Matthew Judon, Justin Simmons, Lorenzo Carter. But your entire offense is under contract, which is a bright side because I do think their offense has the talent to make a Super Bowl run. And like I said, you picked Penix 8th overall, which was a highly questionable pick at the time that, they got a lot of criticism for. But if you ride out with Penix here and he turns out to be the guy, that's a pick like applause. Like people will call you a genius instead of ridiculing the front office there. So ride with Penix, have faith in the pieces you brought in last year that were supposed to take you over the edge to go to the Super Bowl. And for the love of God, feed Bijan Robinson. I still don't think he gets the ball enough. Let Penix get Drake London the ball. Kyle Pitts I don't even know, man. I'm not gonna get into that. That's a whole nother video. But yeah, feed your guys. Feed them, man. And draft guys on defense to fill some of the holes left by the vets there. So now let's move on to my boys, the Carolina Panthers. So what is their key to winning the Super Bowl, you ask? And it's that guy right there, Bryce Young. Finally, over the last several weeks of the season, Bryce looked like the guy we gave up our future to draft, especially that Week 18 game against Atlanta where he had 5 touchdowns. The key here is Bryce Young and Dave Canales. Dave Canales looked like he was turning into the coach we hired him to be, the offensive-minded guru, basically, that could save Bryce Young's career. And that's kind of what he did, or that is what he did over the last few weeks. And the key here is, other than Bryce Young and Canales, is, dude, that defense, God himself needs to come down and revive that defense because, holy crap, man. That defense allowed the most points in NFL history. And there's just a lack of talent on that defense. And as a Panthers fan, I'm used to watching top 10 defenses most of my life. So I think you have to use this draft, starting with the 8th overall pick, to bolster up that defense. And this was kind of expected because last offseason we went all out on the offense through the draft and free agency to make sure we could evaluate Bryce and know if he's going to be our franchise quarterback or would we have to move on in this year's draft. So our offense is all locked in for the year. O-line looks really good. We have Chuba Hubbard. All our wide receivers are locked in. I think Excel, Leggett, and Coker and JT Sanders continue to develop. I could see the Panthers trying to land a receiver either at 8 through Ted McMillan if all the best defensive players on our big board are gone, or a guy through free agency because Thielen's contract does expire after this year. But I think the Panthers' key to winning the Super Bowl is, Bryce Young just turns into a consistent top 10 quarterback next year. Your offense just continues to ball out like it did in that Falcons game, and you bring in a competent defense. I would love to see them draft a guy Abdul Carter is the dream scenario at 8, but he's not going to be there. So, guys like Will Johnson, Mason Graham. We'll see what happens there. But they're definitely better off than the last team in the division, man. The Saints, holy hell. This team is in cap hell. 50 to 60 million in the negatives. And the problem is they're not good. They're that deep into cap hell, and they don't have a playoff team. So I don't want to spend 10 minutes telling you guys how this team can get themselves out of cap hell, because that deserves a whole another video for itself. But just to make things short for them, they somehow need to free up cap by trading guys like Tyrann Mathieu, Derek Carr. And I know Cam Jordan's been a staple in that city for his whole career, but he's got a hefty contract, and you need to start thinking about the future. So for this team to win a Super Bowl, it's a long shot. But I guess it starts with either Derek Carr or Spencer Rattler have to be that guy. And Derek Carr has not looked like he's going to be that guy for some years now. And Spencer Rattler had a pretty shaky year, but I'll give it to him. He had a really, really poor group of guys around him, at least on paper, And so you need Olave to stay healthy. You need Kamara to stay healthy. Like I said, man, Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler are going to have a season for the ages for this team to make a Super Bowl run. And you have a new coaching staff under Kellen Moore, so you got to just hope they can cook up some NOLA magic over there. And they do have a solid draft position, so I think that can be used to address some of the holes that will be left by free agents or guys you trade away. And again, with trading away some of these guys, just recoup on picks, hope you hit on all of them, hope for some miracles, and yeah, man, that's how you win a Super Bowl in New Orleans. All right, so we'll move on to the NFC West now, and we'll start with the Rams. I think the Rams and Rams fans are in store for a really interesting offseason. Solid year, nice playoff run, or not playoff run, but got a playoff win. When you have McVay, you're always expecting this team to be competitive and solid, okay? And it looks like Cooper Kupp's going to be traded this offseason, according to the reports right now. And I don't think this is going to hinder them from making a run in any way. But I think they need to capitalize on this. And they're going to free up a lot of cap if they trade Cooper Kupp. It'll put the team well over $60 million in cap. And I would expect them to get a third-round pick for Cooper Kupp. I'm kind of going based off what Devontae Adams was going for last year when the Jets traded for him. And, Cooper Kupp's shown some injury. He's getting older. His contract's not it's not the worst contract, but it's not the best. So, yeah, I think a third round and a second round if they're lucky, So the thing is, and like I said, you still have Sean McVay here. You have Puka Nacua, who will easily fill that hole for years to come that was left by Cooper Kupp. He missed a couple games last year due to his health, but I think he'll be fine because that man's got some skill. He's a baller. And you absolutely hit in the draft on Jared Verse this year on the defensive side of things. You still got guys like Kyron Williams. You got Stafford, who can play well at any given time. So I think you use your cap space here, improve that defense that wasn't really the best last year. And I'm going to give this franchise the benefit of the doubt. They're a really competent front office that's always competitive. And I think they'll pursue some big-name free agents and be able to land them on defense this offseason. And they'll assess the entire offense and see where they can improve. And again, this is a front office that excels in the draft. So I think they do what they do, make the right picks, pursue the right guys, and this team can be back in the mix for a Super Bowl in Stafford's last couple years here in the league. And some guys I'd like to see them target are Myles Garrett. Aaron Donald left a big hole. Myles Garrett would be huge here with some of that cap. Guys like Debo, Garrett Wilson if he's up for trades, and just, guys like that. So another interesting team in this division. Honestly, just an interesting division all around. But you got Seattle. So they ended the season with a pretty solid record, 11-7. But both offense and defense were kind of middle of the pack. So there's a lot of potential for change here. With the new offensive coordinator. And an issue with this team is that they're currently $25 to $30 million under the cap. And you have trade rumors flying around DK Metcalf on his last year. So for the sake of this video, for them to win the Super Bowl, I'm going to go under the assumption that they go with Geno Smith next year because he's been an above-average quarterback for this team. And I'm going to go under the assumption that they keep DK Metcalf. So for them to win the Super Bowl, I think the offense needs to be firing on all cylinders with JSN, who emerged last year, Metcalf, Sharp, Kenneth Walker, Geno, and you need to fix this O-line up through the draft. There's some really good tackles in this year's draft, and that's a position I think is pretty deep in, at least in the first 2 days. And I think considering the fact that they don't have a lot of cap, use the draft to bolster up your defense, your O-line, and they need to start thinking about a replacement for DK and Lockett, who are both free agents next year. But yeah, this team does that. Another competent organization. I think they're back in the mix. That's their road to the Super Bowl. And now we got the Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals were honestly a very, very solid team on the offense statistically because they have some great pieces there. One of the big issues I saw when I was watching the team this year was that Kyler was just missing a lot of open guys. Trey McBride not having a touchdown for that long last year is criminal. You had Marvin Harrison who was getting open on routes who just wasn't being seen. So things like that need to be fixed for this team to have any chance to go to the Super Bowl. So consistency from Kyler is the first key. And, Marvin Harrison was drafted to be a generational talent, which he is a generational talent, but he was drafted to be a generational receiver in the league. And we didn't see those numbers his rookie year. But I'm not saying I'm not writing him off in any way. He'll be fine. A lot of this was Kyler's fault. But for this team to make a run, you need to see Marvin Harrison take that next step and Kyler get the ball to guys like McBride and Marvin Harrison. And this team has a lot of cap space this offseason, so that needs to be utilized to strengthen the defense through free agency and the draft. And I think this team just needs a top 5 offense that clicks to have any hope to win the Super Bowl. And now to finish things off with a team that I did not think would be the last place team in this division going into this year, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. So I think the thing with this team this year was the injuries. You had McCaffrey, who was out the whole year. Jordan Mason went down later in the year. Brock Purdy wasn't healthy. Ayuk tore a lot of things. Debo missed some games, wasn't looking like Debo. That was just on the offensive side of things. But the thing is, with this being a last place team in the division who had not a good record, the blueprint is still there for them to make a run to the Super Bowl next year. But the key word, again, is health. You need CMC to be back and be CMC because that changes the way a defense approaches you in any given game. You need Purdy to be healthy and get back into that groove of being that system quarterback for this team that worked for them to get to the Super Bowl. And it looks like Debo is going to be traded too. So I'm not a big Ayuk believer even before the injury. I wasn't a huge fan of that contract, even though I knew he was going to get it from someone. But with Debo gone, you definitely need a replacement to pair out there with Kittle and Ayuk. And I do think Ricky Pearsall is going to emerge as a really consistent receiver for Purdy or whatever quarterback's under helm next year. But I would love to see this team target someone like Devontae Adams. He's not going to be on the Jets next year. I think they could use a big body receiver with hands like that. And so I don't think Debo's going to be an unrecoverable loss for this team in any way. And they're in the middle of the pack for cap space, but they have a good amount to work with. But they have some key free agents like Charvarius Ward and Dre Greenlaw. So we'll see what they do there. And then they brought back Rob Saleh as their DC, which is huge. Obviously, that didn't work out for the Jets, but he was great for the Niners. He got the head coach job for a reason. So I'm sure Shanahan's stoked to have him back. And yeah, the key to the Super Bowl, like I said, is a healthy squad. You have Shanahan, you have a great coaching staff, and honestly, this is a draft for their first draft in a few years where they have a really favorable position. So hit on your draft picks. This is an organization that typically does that, and bring in the right guys in free agency. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see this team competitive for the Super Bowl again next year. I'd like to see your guys' thoughts on my takes here. Who do you think is going to make it out the NFC? Do you think there's going to be any big surprises? I'm going to do a video for the AFC soon. Stay tuned, and I appreciate you guys tuning in.